Some messages stay unread, but never unheard. This was Gentle Confessions. Sleep gently and reply when you're ready. Tier 1. The message I left unread. It was just a text. 5 words. Sent at 11:42 p.m. On a Tuesday I don't even remember anymore. It read, "Hey, are you still up?" And I didn't reply. I saw it. I read it. I even paused, thumb hovering over the keyboard. But I didn't type anything. Not that night. Not the next day. Not ever. Her name was Rachel. We met in college, not through some big dramatic moment. Just one of those quiet friendships that forms in shared bus stops and borrowed pens. She was funny. Not in the loud way. More like, she noticed things no one else did, and had this quiet way of making you laugh when you didn't even realize you needed to. We weren't inseparable, not best friend close, but enough that we checked in, studied together, had running jokes about professors we secretly admired or disliked, and I think, at some point, she started leaning on me more. It was subtle at first. She'd cancel plans last minute, say she was tired, didn't feel like going out, didn't want to talk much that day. I told myself, we all have bad weeks, and I gave her space. Not because I didn't care, but because I thought that's what caring looked like. But then the messages changed. From sorry, I can't tonight, to I just feel really heavy. From maybe next week to I haven't left my apartment in 3 days. And that night, that Tuesday, she texted me, "Hey, are you still up?" And I wasn't doing anything important. I was lying on my bed, phone in hand, scrolling through videos I wouldn't remember. I saw her name light up, felt that tiny clench in my chest. The one that said, "This might matter." But I hesitated. Because I didn't know what to say. Because I was tired. Because I told myself, she's probably fine. Because some part of me didn't want to carry someone else's darkness that night. And so, I didn't answer. The next morning, I thought about replying. But something about daylight makes everything seem less urgent. I told myself, if it were serious, she would have followed up. She didn't. And I didn't reach out. A few days passed. Then a week. And suddenly, the silence between us wasn't temporary. It was established. I still saw her around, sometimes in the library, once at the grocery store. She never looked mad, just quieter, a little faded at the edges. She stopped texting, and I never started. Months passed. I graduated, moved, started a job, and then one day, a mutual friend mentioned her name, said she'd gone through a rough time, that she'd moved back home for a while, that things had gotten dark for her, really dark. And I felt it, that message, still sitting in my phone, unread by me, unanswered by me, like a door someone knocked on while I was home and chose not to open. I don't know what she would have said if I had replied. Maybe nothing serious. Maybe just small talk. Maybe everything. Maybe it wasn't about solving anything. Maybe she just wanted someone to hear her voice. And I missed it. Not because I was cruel. Not because I didn't care. But because I thought I could answer later. Because I thought silence didn't mean anything until it did. There's a guilt that comes from what you did, but there's a softer, quieter kind, the kind that lives in what you didn't do. And that's the one I carry. Tire 2. Why I said nothing. I told myself I was just giving her space. That was the first excuse. It sounded kind. It sounded mature. We all need space sometimes. Right to think, to breathe, to untangle ourselves without the weight of someone else watching. But looking back, I wasn't giving her space. I was giving myself distance. From the discomfort. From the fear. From the quiet voice inside me that whispered, "What if she's not okay?" Because if I replied, I might have had to ask real questions. And if I asked, I might have heard things I wasn't ready for. And that scared me. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't trust myself to hold the answer. What if she needed more than I could give? What if I said the wrong thing? What if I became responsible for something I didn't know how to fix? So I said nothing. I told myself she had other friends, that I wasn't her person, that we weren't that close. And maybe that was true. But pain doesn't always reach for the closest person. Sometimes it just reaches for the one who happens to be there at the right moment, with the right heart. And that night, that text, she chose me. And I said nothing. I told myself I was tired, and I was. That year drained me: academics, finances, family pressure. But tiredness doesn't erase responsibility, and silence doesn't stop consequences. I thought I was protecting my peace, but really, I was hiding behind it. There's a myth that being a good friend means always knowing what to say, but maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's showing up, even when you don't. Maybe it's replying, not with answers, but with presence. Hey, I see you. Hey, I'm here. Hey, I don't know what to say, but I won't disappear. That's all she needed. And I couldn't even give that. I thought the silence would be temporary, that we'd talk again soon, that we'd both just be busy for a while. But silence, when left alone, hardens. It stops being space and becomes absence. And once absence settles in, it's hard to break. Not because it's too big, but because it becomes familiar. And the longer I waited, the harder it became to say something. Because what do you say after saying nothing for so long? Sorry, I vanished. Sorry, I left you on red when you were drowning. There's no emoji for that. No shortcut back into someone's trust. So I stayed quiet. And every day I did, the weight grew. I remember once seeing her across the street. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and looked away. I'll never know. But I watched her walk with headphones in, shoulders slightly hunched, that familiar orange scarf around her neck. And I wanted to call out, to say something, anything. But I didn't. I turned and walked the other way. Because cowardice doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes, it looks like silence. Tier 3. What she might have needed. I think about that night more often than I admit. The way her message lit up my screen. The way I read it and reread it and still said nothing. And I wonder, not just what she wanted to say, but what she needed me to say. Maybe she didn't want a solution. Maybe she didn't need advice. Maybe she wasn't looking for some perfect response. Maybe she just needed to know that someone would answer when she reached into the dark. Sometimes, I imagine the moment just before she typed that message. Was she sitting on her floor, legs crossed, back against her bed? Was she holding the phone with both hands, reading our old messages for courage? Did she hesitate before pressing send? Was her heart racing? Was that message a question or a whisper? Hey, are you still up? Maybe she just wanted to hear that she wasn't the only one awake, that someone else out there still remembered her, still cared. Maybe she didn't want to talk. Maybe she just wanted company. Even silent company. I think about what I could have said. Something simple. Yeah, I'm up. How are you feeling? Want to talk? I'm here. 4 words. 2 seconds. A heartbeat of connection. And it might have changed everything. Or nothing. I'll never know. But I do know this. Even the smallest reply can feel like rescue when you're drowning in your own head. I think she needed something I didn't understand back then. Not big gestures. Not dramatic check-ins. Not late-night therapy sessions. Just small reminders that she wasn't invisible. That someone noticed her silence. That someone remembered her voice. That someone was still listening. I imagine what would have happened if I had answered. Would we have talked? Would she have told me everything? Or would we have just sat in the comfort of knowing we weren't alone? Would she have laughed even just once? A soft, tired laugh that said, "I'm still here." Because sometimes that's all we need to say, "I'm still here." I think she needed to be seen. Not as a problem to solve. Not as someone falling apart. Just as herself. Rachel. The girl who once bought me a muffin when I failed my econ quiz. The one who cried when she watched that movie about the boy and the dog. The one who once told me her favorite sound in the world was rain hitting leaves. She was soft. And the world doesn't always hold softness well. But I could have. Even just for a moment. I could have replied. And maybe that reply would have been a thread, something she could hold on to when everything else was unraveling. I've learned something since then when someone reaches out. Even with the smallest gesture, they are trusting you with their silence. They are saying, "I chose you. Please don't disappear." And I did. I disappeared. Not out of cruelty. Not out of apathy. But because I didn't know that showing up doesn't have to be loud to be life-saving. I think what she needed that night wasn't a hero, wasn't a fixer. She just needed someone who would whisper back, "I'm here, and you matter." Tier 4. The silence between then and now. There was no big moment after, no fallout, no confrontation, no angry text asking, "Why didn't you reply?" Just silence. Not loud, not accusatory, just soft. Like snowfall that covers everything but says nothing. She never texted again, and I never reached out. Weeks passed, then months, then a full semester. And by then, it felt too late, too awkward, too heavy, too shameful. Silence is funny that way. At first, it feels like protection, a barrier, a shield. But over time, it becomes distance, then a wall, then a void you're too afraid to cross because now it's grown teeth. I told myself we had just grown apart. People do that. Write different majors, different cities, different lives. But deep down, I knew the real reason. We didn't grow apart. I stepped away. She stayed still. And the space between us became a silence I carved myself. I carried it. Not in a loud, visible way, but in the quiet. When I'd walk past the building we used to study in. When I'd hear someone laugh like her in a cafe. When I'd scroll through old photos and see that one of us, her in that oversized gray hoodie, me holding up a coffee like a victory flag. We looked happy. Because we were. Until we weren't. Until I disappeared and she didn't ask me why, because maybe she already knew. There's something about guilt that doesn't fade. It settles in you, grows quiet roots, and makes itself comfortable in the corners of your memory. Not enough to consume you, but enough to shape how you move through the world. I became more careful with texts, more aware of pauses in conversations, more likely to ask, "Are you okay?" and actually mean it. Because of her. Years later, I searched her name on social media. It wasn't to reconnect. Not really. I think I just wanted to see if she was okay. If she made it. Her profile was private. But the little circle said she was active. Still out there. Still living. And something about that made me breathe easier. Even if we'd never speak again. Even if I'd never get to say sorry. Just knowing she was still there, still choosing to show up to the world in some way was enough. For now. Sometimes, I still imagine what I'd say if I ran into her. Maybe at a bookstore, or a coffee shop. I wouldn't apologize right away. That would feel like stealing the moment for my own relief. Maybe I'd just say, "Hey, I remember you." And if she nodded, if she didn't walk away, maybe I'd say, "I've thought about you more than you'd believe." That's it. Not to fix anything, but to let her know the silence wasn't forgetfulness. It was fear, and failure, and growing up too late. I think silence between people is rarely empty. It holds everything we didn't say, didn't do, didn't become. And mine holds her. Still. Tier 5. The apology I never gave. If I could write her one message now, just one, I think it would go like this. Rachel, I'm sorry I disappeared when you reached out that night. I know you probably don't even remember what you said, but I do. And I remember how I didn't say anything back. That silence. It wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I was afraid. Afraid I wouldn't say the right thing. Afraid of the weight behind your message. Afraid of how close your sadness felt to my own. I'd pause there. Because the truth is, I didn't ghost her to hurt her. I ghosted her because I didn't know how to be there. Not really. Not in the way she needed. I thought ignoring the message would make it disappear. But it didn't. It stayed. And it stayed with me. Like an echo in a room I don't visit often but never forget how to find. I should have answered, even if I didn't know what to say. Even if all I said was, I'm here. Because now I know. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. I'm sorry you had to sit with that silence. I'm sorry that in your moment of reaching out, I turned away. You didn't deserve that. No one does. You were brave to message me, even if it was small. Even if it didn't look like bravery. You were trying, and I wasn't there to try with you. I'd sit with those words for a moment, and then, maybe, just maybe, I'd let them go. Not to forget, not to erase, but to stop carrying them like a punishment. Because I think she'd want that. I think if she could hear this, if she ever hears this, she'd say, it's okay. We were young. And you're still learning. And I am. Still learning how to show up. Still learning that silence isn't neutral, it speaks. Still learning that even when it feels like too much, you can still answer gently. This is the apology I never gave. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how. Until now. And if she's listening somewhere, somehow I hope it reaches her like a soft breeze through a window. Quiet, but present. I carry your name softly now, Rachel, not as guilt, but as a reminder to never let fear speak louder than care, to never ignore someone brave enough to whisper, and to always, always answer back, even if it's just I'm here. This was Gentle Confessions. Thank you for listening, and good night.